Shabbat Shalom everyone. Welcome to Science Lab. The signs are happening because Lord Jesus is coming.
Every day we are looking at some of the great signs that are happening around us. In this episode, we are going to see some of the signs in Israel.
The global community was rocked on August 13, 2020 by the revelation of historic peace agreement between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, brokered by the United States. The announcement came in the form of a joint statement signed by US President Donald Trump, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi and UAE Deputy Supreme Commander Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed.
According to the statement, Israel and UAE have agreed to full normalization of relations between the two countries, opening direct ties between two of the Middle East's most dynamic societies and advanced economies.
It is expected that the representatives from Israel and the UAE will meet in the very near future to sign bilateral deals regarding various areas of mutual benefit, including the establishment of reciprocal embassies, investment, tourism, direct flights, security, telecommunications, technology, energy, healthcare, culture, and the environment. The agreement makes the UAE the third Arab country in history to establish diplomatic relations with Israel. The first was Egypt, which signed a landmark peace agreement in 1979, and the second, Jordan, which signed a treaty in 1994. All three agreements have been brokered by the US, and all parties involved anticipate that other nations will follow a lead of the UAE. According to President Trump's Oval Office address, the effort was led by his advisor and son-in-law Jared Kushner, calling it a labor of love. It is being titled the Abraham Accord, and Twitter was alive with expressions of admiration among the parties. Who would have ever dreamt that there would be a peace agreement with an Arab country without our returning to the 1967 borders? Netanyahu said Israel and UAE are two of the most advanced countries in the world, and together we can transform the region. The UAE's ambassador to the US, Yusuf Al-Otaiba, called the deal a win for diplomacy and for the region, as he praised all the parties for their courage and vision. He added, "It's a significant advancement in Arab-Israeli relations that lowers tension and creates new energy for positive change." Kushner was quick to give kudos to US President, stating that Trump had urged the team to take an untraditional approach. The president tries to unite people, focusing on common interest as opposed to common grievances. Ron Dermer, Israel's ambassador to the United States, tweeted, "A great day for peace. Israel commends the courage of MBZ for the historic decision of the UAE to join Egypt and Jordan in making peace with Israel. Israel deeply appreciates all that President Trump has done to make this breakthrough possible. More to come." U.S. Secretary of the State Mike Pompeo congratulated Israel and the UAE for the achievement, which is a significant step forward for peace in the Middle East. Blessed are the peacemakers, Mubarak and Mazal Tov, congratulations in Arabic and Hebrew respectively. A senior Likud official praised the deal, declaring, "This is the first time in history that Prime Minister Netanyahu broke the paradigm of land for peace and brought instead peace in exchange for peace." Amidst all of the backslapping, however, there were those who were much less enthusiastic. Senior Palestinian official Hanan Ashrawi condemned the deal, saying the UAE has come out in the open on its secret dealings normalization with Israel, telling Prince Mohammed, "May you ever be sold out by your friends." Palestinian TV reported that Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas called an urgent meeting of his top leadership to hammer out a response. A spokesperson for Hamas, the terror organizing ruling the Gaza Strip, called the agreement a free reward to the occupation for its crimes and violations against the Palestinian people. UAE Foreign Minister Anwar Gargash, however, stated firmly the ongoing commitment of the UAE to the future of the Palestinian state and the concerns of the Palestinian people, declaring that the UAE embassy in Israel will not be in Jerusalem until final status negotiation between Israelis and Palestinians are a reality. David El-Ayani, head of the Israeli umbrella group Yasha, representing Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria, reacted strongly to Netanyahu's agreement as part of the deal to suspend extension of Israeli sovereignty over parts of Judea and Samaria. He accused Netanyahu of betraying some of his most loyal political supporters. He has received 500,000 residents of the area and hundreds of thousands of voters. El-Hayani said. Netanyahu, however, was cheerful to state that he delayed the annexation plans, not abandoned them. Those plans remain on the table, he stated.
So far, we are seeing about the signs happening in Israel. After seeing all these things, we definitely need a break. Don't go anywhere. We'll continue after a short break. Welcome back to Science Lab. The signs are happening because Lord Jesus is coming. Before the break, we are seeing about the signs happening in Israel. Let's continue. The strategic decision to halt the annexation of the West Bank also allowed Mohammed bin Zayed the ability to save face for the agreement.
He tweeted during a call with President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, an agreement was reached to stop further Israeli annexions of Palestinian territories. The UAE and Israel also agreed to cooperation and setting of roadmap to establishing a bilateral relationship.
And with the dam broken on accepting Israel without demanding hard-hitting concession on the Palestinian issue, other Gulf states could soon follow.
United States Ambassador to Israel David Friedman noted, "This deal will certainly encourage the other Gulf sheikdoms, Bahrain, Oman, Qatar, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia, all of which have had covert and overt business and intelligent dealings with Israel, to follow the Emirates' lead. They will not want to let UAE have a leg up in being able to marry this financial capital." to make both countries stronger and more prosperous. Bahrain is tipped to be the next Gulf state that follows the Emirati lead as early as this year. President Trump said, "Now that the ice has been broken, I expect more Arab and Muslim countries to follow the United Arab Emirates." As noted by many commentators, one of the main reasons Abu Dhabi is willing to side with the United States and Israel is to create a united front against the rise of Iran. The Obama-era nuclear deal with Iran sought to recreate the Middle East, where the neighborhood was shared between Iran, the Gulf states, and Israel. This was a huge shift in American policy that rewarded the terrorist state of Iran while degrading America's relationship with Israel and the Gulf states. Terrified by the UN's pro-Iran policy was the UAE, which is currently at war alongside Saudi Arabia against the Houthis, an Iranian proxy in Yemen. This growing Iranian power led the UAE and Saudi Arabia to partner increasingly with Israel, a nation that was willing to be a bulwark against the growing Iranian empire. Biblical prophecy explains that two alliances between Middle Eastern states will form in our day. The first is a radical Islamic alliance led by Iran, known as the King of the South. Daniel chapter 11 verse 40 mentions that the King of the South has an offensive foreign policy that pushes the region to the brink of war. Other nations included in this alliance will be Iraq and the nations along the west coast of the Red Sea passageway, as well as Libya. The second alliance is found in Psalms 83. The Psalms are not typically prophetic in nature, but Psalm 83 is different. There is no case in history where the alliance of nations mentioned in Psalm 83 has ever come together. For they have consulted together with one consent, and they are confederate against thee. Tabernacles of Edom and the Ishmaelites, of Moab and the Hagarnes, Gebal and Ammon and Amalek, the Philistines with inhabitants of Tyre. Asher also is joined with them. Many of these ancient names refer to nations that still exist in the same territory.
In this peace deal between Gulf states and Israel, we see all the hallmarks of fulfillment of this prophecy. And based on these prophecies, we can expect Israel's relationship with the modern Arab states in Gulf to indeed become stronger as they work to counter Iran's rise.
But we can also expect that once the great Iranian threat is defeated, many of the Israelis' allies will turn on it in what will be the great double cross of history.
Israel is a timepiece we should watch out for in these last days. All these incidents that are happening in and around Israel shows us that indeed we are living in the last days. Thank you for watching this episode. Don't forget to tune into Science Lab next time.
Now we would like to end the program by asking you a question. What is the nickname of the peace deal between Israel and UAE? Option A, Abraham Accord. Option B, Ismail Accord. And option C, Jacob Accord.
Send us the right answer to sciencelab@angeltv.org. If you have missed any of the episodes, don't worry, you can watch it again and again in our Science Lab YouTube page. But don't forget to like, share and comment on the video.
Ask your friends and relatives to watch the Science Lab so that they will know that we are living in the last days. Remember, signs are happening because Lord Jesus is coming.
Maranatha.